Our maternity statistics in Australia are appalling.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, a hospital is a business. Business needs to function with the amount of staffing that they have, with the budget that they are given, and using the best amount of resources. Women deserve to have good births.
Welcome back to another episode of the Belly2Birth Podcast. I'm really excited to introduce my special guest today. And before I do though, being that this is the birth of a new baby of mine, I would really love to ask a favour of you all. Please make sure that you subscribe or follow the podcast. And a little suggestion that I would like to make to you is that any episodes that you feel really resonate with you, make your own playlist. Actually save the episode to your own playlist so that in the future you can come back and listen to it again. And another thing that I'd like to share just before we jump into this episode is I've actually got some really great free resources for you all on my website. I have a number of free hypnobirthing meditations, and something that I really love, which is a great resource, is questions to ask caregivers. Now, that's leading me into introducing my first guest on the podcast, Nicole Garratt, who is a medical caregiver herself and a very well-known and respectful midwife here on the Gold Coast. Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're
great
welcome.
to be here.
Welcome into the new studio.
It's beautiful.
It is. I know. It's so exciting. It's so great to have you actually in and we can have this conversation. Now, I would love for you to actually become a resident midwife here on the podcast. So for those of you who are watching or listening, you're going to be hearing a lot from Nicole in the future. I'm going to be inviting Nicole in quite a bit, and we're going to just really open up and discuss different topics and to really help educate you and help you ask better questions on your journey. But before we do, I want you to get to know Nicole. So, Nicole, for those who haven't met you before, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do as a midwife?
Yeah, sure. So I am a midwife here on the coast. I've been a midwife for about 10 years now. I'm a mum. I've got 4 kids who are much more grown up now. So I'm in a bit of a different space than I was, when I first started my midwifery career. And I have worked in the public hospital system. I've done some work in the private hospital system, and just recently, probably in the last maybe 4 or 5 years, moved into private practice. So now I exclusively work privately with women who are planning mostly home birth, but still also women who plan to birth in hospital for varying reasons. So that's pretty much me in a nutshell in relation to what I do.
What sparked your passion to become a midwife?
Funnily enough, if you told me I would have been a midwife in high school, I would have laughed. Once I left high school, I actually worked for a law firm for a number of years before I became pregnant with my first baby. And then I was home for the first 3 babies and that sort of thing. And it's only when I was looking at going back into, I guess, work, am I going to go back to work? What might that look like? And I had gone back to my old job here and there to cover leave or, for holiday cover and that sort of thing. And that's when I started going, hang on a minute. I don't know if I want to keep doing the 9 to 5. I don't know if drafting briefs for barristers is where my passion is. So it's only over time being with my own babies. There was a pivotal moment, and I remember it so clearly. I was awake, of course, in the middle of the night, as we are, with my 3rd baby at the time, breastfeeding. And this was in the time before Netflix, and I was watching, I think, SBS or something, and there was a documentary about midwives in Guatemala and Nepal, and it was all about how they schlep all up the mountains, visiting the women, they come to their homes for the births. It was talking about the type of care that they provide, really, traditional midwifery care, and it just sparked something. And I don't know what it was, and it just was a little seed that kind of grew in my brain. And over time, the following months, I sort of got some books out from the library and I read up more about it. And then I went along to a university, a careers open day, and I felt so out of place. They were all high school students in uniform, and here's me with my 3 kids in a pram, and I was like, what am I doing here? But it just felt like I couldn't put it down. I had to keep sort of following the threads. So then I took a leap and applied for university, and I got in, and I was like, I'm doing it.
With 3 kids.
So then I jumped into uni, and while I was at uni, you start a course or some education and you're thinking, is this going to be actually what I think it's going to be? Or you maybe get into it and think, oh, this isn't what I thought. But as soon as I started, I had some amazing lecturers who were very much on the, I guess, women-centred, very physiologically birth-focused. Some of them had been homebirth midwives, years and years before their academic careers, and it just made me realise I was in the right place. And there were so many women from so many different walks of life, really young women straight out of high school, right up to a woman who, she was turning 60 that year. And I was like, mate, if she can do it, I can do this. Like coming into uni, I'd never been to uni before. So that sort of got the ball rolling. So once I started the degree, I was like, this is it. My first placement, the following placements, it just reignited what I maybe already knew. It's like this was the right thing.
Now, can I just ask you a question in regards to that? What was the training like at uni compared to the actual placement?
Yeah, well, that's a very interesting question, Shani. So really what I found is what we were taught at uni was absolutely nothing like what we found in the hospital, and that was quite tricky because we did have some of the older, I guess, nurse midwives who probably were hospital trained. So they were very much like, you don't learn midwifery in a university from books. You learn it in hospital. So we were turning up in hospital and they'd be like, well, do you know how to do all these things? We didn't. They're like, well, what are they teaching you if you don't know how to make a bed, you don't know how to test urine, you don't really know how to take a blood pressure? Like, what are they actually teaching you? But what they were teaching, I guess, was the philosophy. And obviously over time, we did learn how to take blood pressures and all of those things. And that early first part of our degree was literally just observing the care, observing what happens with women, observing how the care unfolds in that hospital space. So it was actually really confronting to come into the hospital environment and be, wow, the type of midwifery they're teaching us, this is not what we're seeing. And some of our students were really lucky and were placed in like more birth centre models of care. So they maybe didn't have quite the stark difference.
Right.
But I found definitely going from my studies to I guess a traditional hospital style was really quite, oh wow, there's a big gap in my knowledge here. And for a little while I even started to think maybe I should have done nursing. I didn't want to, but I was like, maybe that would help me feel like I fit in better here. I mean, over time, I guess my confidence grew and my skills grew, and I no longer think that, and I definitely don't want to do nursing now. But back then, as a very brand new midwifery student, I felt like that was missing, and maybe that nursing would have helped me understand that hospital environment better.
Yeah.
So, yeah, very interesting that it was much more different than we thought.
Okay. Like, how specifically though? Like, was it that you were learning about physiology, like natural birth, and then you went into the hospital, and what were you seeing was the difference? Was it that you were seeing a lot more inductions or cesarean? Because I've heard this. Like, I've actually had clients who, through their own birth experience, found the passion for birth and went on and did midwifery, and they had their own experience, which, because they did so much preparation, was really connective, and they had the natural birth. And I think they went into this, and I know that a lot of midwives do go in like, you've got this passion, you want to support women, and the placement was something that I'd get phone calls going like, this is nothing like what I thought it was going to be. So the reason why I'm asking, and please answer from a place that you feel comfortable with, is I really want this podcast to open people up to where we're at so that they also are not going in to a model, but blindsided. It's actually more to help prepare, and also realising it's not the midwives in the system that potentially want that, and it's by them being educated, being able to tell midwives or obstetricians what they want, that they can potentially avoid all the interventions that we now see in birth. Because, and actually let's maybe move through, like, you then worked actually in the hospital system. So what was that like for you? And then we can...
I think when I first started, to be honest, I did really enjoy it. I think having gone from the working in the law firm type space, I realised I really thrive in busy, high-pressure environments, which is why I loved a busy postnatal ward. Other people would feel like they were drowning. I was in my element.
Yeah.
So yes, to a degree, you can't provide the midwifery care to the standard to potentially that now I know is the best standard. But when you're a student midwife, or I've only been a midwife for a year, I felt like I was providing the best possible care in the environment that I was in. Yeah. But I thrived on that really busy environment, bustling from room to room, chatting to lots of mums, speaking to lots of families. Like, I loved that. Yeah. But what I think I started to find over time, and I did work my way through the hospital system. I was a team leader, so I was, responsible for the antenatal and postnatal ward. So I enjoyed that side of, I guess, the management behind it. Mm-hmm. But it's only over time that I started to realise, well, yeah, women are getting care, but it felt like baseline, bare minimum, get them out the door so they can't come back and have a complaint kind of care.
Right.
It didn't feel like, well, this is the best we can offer. It started to feel like ticking boxes to make sure that there's no, possibility for litigation. Right. We told them about safe sleeping, so if they don't do that, that's not on us. Like, we told them about making sure that if their baby's doing enough wheeze and poos, if you've turned up to ED because your baby's jaundiced, well, we told you what to do. That's not on us. Right. It started to feel really much about how can we tick the boxes and get them out the door and make them not be our problem. Send them out to the GPs, the, community support, not our problem anymore. And that's where I started to find it difficult, because the more I learnt, the more I was a midwife, the more midwives I spoke to, the more midwives I met at conferences, the midwives working in private practice, the more I was like, hang on a minute, this is not the best version of care. This is, it's bare minimum. Women are going home and they're mostly happy and well.
Satisfied,
yeah. But overall, it was starting to feel more and more like the bare minimum. And the more I started doing work outside of the hospital, the things that I was taking on myself for, like, professional development, meeting other midwives, and the more just my own learning, listening to podcasts from other women, learning more about, home birth side of things, the more I started thinking, well, hang on a minute. This can't be the best there is. Yeah. And then that's what sort of led me to doing the feelers out there, to inquiring into more what continuity of care looked like outside of a hospital, because continuity inside a hospital looks very, very different. And that was something that I guess I was like, that's interesting. The midwives who work in MGP in the hospital, and I myself aspired to that. I was like, when my kids are a bit older, I would love to work in this MGP model of care. But then being a team leader in that space and watching midwives go out into the community, doing contracts in MGP and coming back, they were coming back so burnt out. They were shells of themselves that I actually went, forget it. I don't want to do MGP. MGP sounds awful. Like, I do not want to be doing this continuity of model of care. That sounds horrible.
Right.
But because of how burnt out they were. But then the more I learned, the more I was thinking, well, hang on. The midwives out in the community, the home birth midwives, they are not all incredibly burnt out shells of human beings. They're actually thriving. They're living their best lives. They seem so happy in their jobs. Like, yeah, sometimes they're tired. Sometimes things happen that make life hard. But by and large, they actually speak so highly of their role. So I was like, well, how are the MGP midwives in the hospital when they work in a team of 3 or 4, so they've got support, how come they are just so exhausted and feeling so run down? But the midwives who are working in private practice, they usually work alone with 1 or 2 little other midwife groups that they might work with, but they're mainly alone. So how is it that they are doing as much work as these people, but they feel so much more, I guess, fulfilled in their role? And that's where I sort of started diving down into that. And a lot of it came down to being able to provide the care that felt good for them, and being able to support women in the way that felt good for them, and not having to carry the load of other midwives, on leave and things like that, because you're only responsible for your own caseload.
So what do you think's happened then, or happening within our maternity model? Because what percentage of women would birth in a hospital? Like 99%?
I think they've said about 2 to 2.5 to maybe 3%. So 97 to 99% of women birth in hospital.
So knowing that and speaking here today, how can we empower women more, and even empower midwives who want to actually provide the care to women, and though may be restricted because of the model, because of the patriarchal system? Because when we look at evidence now, like as per the Australian Mothers and Babies report, we're at like a 42% cesarean rate now.
I know.
And
it's appalling.
Do you know what the current induction rates are?
So it's about 40% for first-time mums.
Okay.
And it's higher if you've got risk factors. So 40% for first-time mums, I think, is if you're a healthy low-risk woman, and most of those are related to things like postdates or prolonged rupture of membranes, things like that. But if you're a woman with risk factors, so maybe you have a big baby, maybe you're considered high BMI, maybe you've got something else going on, that goes up. Yeah. So it sounds terrible to say, but our maternity statistics in Australia are appalling.
Yeah.
They really are. Like, we're on par with America. The only thing that we can say we do well is that our maternal death rate is low. That, whereas America's is quite high for I guess, a well-resourced country. So, as you said, it's more like 1 in 3 women having a cesarean, over a 40% induction rate. The amount of babies going to the nursery has increased, and they're not just preterm babies. They're healthy, well, not obviously healthy because they're going to the nursery, but they're full-term babies. So why are we having so many full-term babies that need to go to the nursery? What's happening there? Why are we having so many women that need induction? Why are we having so many women that are having cesareans? And yes, I guess depending on who you speak to, they will say it's because women are older and fatter and less healthy, and some women do want to choose that path.
Yes.
All of that is partly true. But the fact is, women have been having babies since the dawn of time. Women have been having babies in their 40s for a long time. But our definition of high risk has expanded. Yeah. So all over the last 10 or 15 years, our definition of what's considered high risk, what qualifies a woman to be recommended in induction, has expanded. My own personal story, I have small babies. My babies are all born on the 5th percentile or below.
Okay.
So back then, I did not have any further growth scans. I was not recommended to have further monitoring. I wasn't recommended an induction. My babies were considered healthy and normal for my size, and that's fine. Now, from the current guideline, women with a baby on the less than 10th percentile, repeat growth scans, potential induction at 39 weeks. I look at how my babies came out. My biggest baby was 3 kilos. My smallest baby was 2.5. Okay. So they are considered small babies by anyone's standard. But when I had those babies somewhere between 20 and 13 years ago, there was not this push that I would need all these extra monitoring and then go on to need all these things and potentially have an induction. Well, if I'd had an induction with my 2.5 kilo baby 2 weeks early, she would have been much smaller and would have needed much more support than she actually needed. So it's because our definition of what is high risk is expanding, and therefore our recommendations to women, or you fall in that high risk category, our recommendation for women who qualify for induction is expanding. So that is where we're seeing more and more induction being recommended, is because our definition of what is considered high risk has expanded.
So knowing this and explaining this, what can women, or what would you suggest, and what have you seen as a midwife when you worked in the medical model? What have you seen can really help women to create more connection, rather than, it's not about going in and fighting this system. It's making sense of it, which I think that is, for one, so important to have an education, and also potentially knowing that, like, do you fear that there is actually fear within the system? Like the fear of litigation, the fear of something happening, and so they want to control the outcomes as much as possible. And they can control an induction and they can control a cesarean. They can't really control physiology.
Yeah.
Do you think that has a part to play?
I think that definitely has a part to play. And also we have to just look at the sheer volume of women. Yeah. So, if you've got a hospital that's doing 5,000 births a year, that's, 300 or 400 or so births potentially a month. You can't just have 300 or 400 women walking in off the street and being in physiological labour. Like, where are they going to go? Yeah. Like, where are we going to put them all? And yes, of course, there are a portion of those women who genuinely do need induction.
Absolutely.
Who genuinely do potentially need a cesarean. So there is an element of weighing up, I guess, the best use of those resources. And of course, I know it makes people uncomfortable, but at the end of the day, a hospital is a business. They are running like a well-oiled business. The business needs to function with the amount of staffing that they have, with the budget that they are given, and using the best amount of resources. Now, I know we want it to be more touchy-feely than that, but at the end of the day, at the top of the chain, that is how it runs. When I'm the team leader on the ward, I'm being told we have X amount of women booked in for this evening for induction. We need X amount of beds. Who have you got who can go? So you are balancing between the first-time mum who's not feeding as opposed to the caesarean mum who's only 24 hours post-birth but doing pretty well. Maybe she could go home. So there is an element of balancing those resources. So that is where part of it comes in, is there's got to be a balancing of resources and how we look at, women will tell you, oh, well, I was told if I didn't book my induction, there may not be a space. But also part of it is there is more litigation. And one of the things, I can't remember who told me this, but someone had said to me when I was a very junior midwife that obstetricians and hospitals are often sued more for what they didn't do than what they did do. So, for example, if there's a bad outcome because a baby got stuck and that baby's now got some kind of mental impairment, brain damage, they could be sued because they didn't do a caesarean.
Right.
They're not often sued for the caesarean they did that was unnecessary.
Yeah.
And I guess when it comes to medico-legal things, like I worked in personal injuries and medico-legal for years before I moved into midwifery. So often it's really difficult for a woman to prove a case about why they shouldn't have done a caesarean because you can get 3 experts who will agree that it should have been done and, well, that's it, the case falls over. Yeah. Whereas to show, well, actually, there were some signs on that CTG, or that baby should have been got out earlier but that one obstetrician was sick and the other one couldn't get there quick enough from ED. Something should have happened here sooner. And then there is that element of concern around litigation. So, of course, I guess, and also the other side of it is that obstetricians and midwives do see terrible things. Sometimes they see really awful, traumatic things. And so, yes, it's traumatic for the family and they go home and they have to deal with that. But midwives and doctors may see that multiple times over their career and there's a lot of vicarious trauma. So if you are a doctor or a midwife who's seen a bad outcome, it would make sense that you feel a little bit twitchy sometimes about, oh, here's another baby that's a big baby and the last big baby we had was a really terrible shoulder dystocia that ended up in that baby being sent to another hospital and we're not sure of the outcome yet. Yeah. So, of course, that doctor might feel a bit like, ooh, and that midwife feels stressed about that. But that's part of the work of being a midwife is to sit in that discomfort and to, I guess, work on that yourself and obstetricians, working through the things that happen and our own fears.
So you're not projecting that into the
because
next
you can't
birth.
walk in. I can't go from one room where a woman's had a really big bleed and come into this room and be like, well, that's probably going to happen again. That's not this woman's problem. Yeah. That's my stuff.
Do they teach you the skills to deal with that?
Absolutely. They do have a level of we talk like in midwifery, I don't know what it's like for obstetricians, but for midwives we do go through uni talking about reflective practice. That's a really big part. It's probably the bane of my life in uni, writing all these reflections. I'm like, what am I ever going to need this for? But, being able to have reflective practice. Also, we had things like clinical supervision. So you'd have groups of midwives and lecturers or other people in that sort of sphere where you'd get together and talk about things that have happened and, de-identifying women or talking about processes that have happened or where you notice that a process fell down and maybe that let the team down and you would get that more. And that is, I guess, I felt like, funnily enough, it was actually more structured in university than it is when you're in the actual hospital. Okay. It's available to you, but it's kind of like a sticker on the wall in the tea room. So whether you actually choose to engage with that, it's not. Whereas at university, I felt like it was kind of structured. This Friday, once a month, you get together with your clinical supervision group and it's compulsory. Unless you're at a birth, you go. And if you don't, you have to have a reason. Whereas in hospital, they're like, here you go, here's a thing that you can use. You can call this free service. You can do all these things. But I guess the onus is on you to take time outside of your already busy life to potentially engage with that. So it's maybe not as, I guess, structured. Yeah. So most midwives don't unless something has happened, unless they've got something happening in their personal life and they're like, oh, I'm trying to balance that with being a good caregiver, or I've had this horrific outcome. I need to talk to someone about it. Okay, I'll go do that. But they're not doing it on a regular monthly basis. Okay. yeah, so that's something that there is available to us.
So being you have worked in the medical model within a hospital, what would be your top suggestions as a midwife for couples, for women who are choosing to birth in the hospital?
I think the first thing is to remember that a recommendation of care is just that. It's a recommendation. It is an offering to you of what's available to you. So you can accept or decline any recommendation at any time. But obviously we don't want to go in and just be declining everything because it all sounds big and scary. But you have a right to decline something. If you have asked questions and you've got the answers that you need that have helped you make a decision, then that's that. Yeah. You can say no. Now, sometimes for some clinicians, that can be really difficult. When a woman has declined something and I've told you A, B, and C and why we think you should do it, and potentially a woman has declined. Some clinicians feel that that means maybe they didn't explain it well enough. Maybe the woman doesn't understand and that's why she's saying no. But often women do understand and they do know what you mean. They just don't want what you're offering, and that's okay. But for some clinicians, that can be tricky. So that's where women sometimes have to advocate for themselves because they're going, well, I hear what you're saying. I understand why this is recommended to me. I understand that these are the risks that you think that this may improve or it might impose to me if I don't accept this. But I hear that and I am still choosing to decline.
And so that's where they're taking responsibility for their own decision making.
Absolutely.
Do you find it challenging when a couple or a mother comes in and they know nothing, they don't know their options, they're literally just going, well, you're the expert?
I would say that from a system point of view, that actually makes it easy.
Right.
Because you tell them what you want them to do and they go and do that, and then you tick the boxes and you move on to the next client that you need to see.
Okay.
So when it comes to hospital-based care, women who are not well informed, they'll often go, oh, I'm not really making a birth plan, I'm going to go with the flow.
Yeah.
There is always a birth plan.
I call her the free spirit archetype.
Right. There is always a birth plan. It's whether it's yours or it's
the
theirs.
hospital's. Wow, that's a great way of putting it.
So at the end of the day, there's an idea of what they want the care to look like for you. And some of those recommendations may very well be very suited to you and some may not be. But if you don't know what your options are, you don't have any, which I'm sure we all say.
One of my favourite quotes, yes.
Yeah, but there are, look, to be honest with you, in my years of working in the hospital system, I have met the women who are so educated, so empowered, very firm in their beliefs about what they do and don't want, right through to the women who, for varying reasons, they either don't know or they're not particularly fussed and they just want to be told what to do. And those women are fine with accepting a recommendation without really knowing much about it.
Yeah.
They are like, I don't really mind. You're the midwife or doctor. I want you to tell me what to do. Now, if I was to meet those women out in the home birth community, I would be like, you're probably not suitable for home birth because it's not my job to tell you what to do. But there are some women in the hospital system who really don't want to go down a rabbit hole about everything.
Sure.
They don't want to listen to all the podcasts. They just want to be told, well, these are the recommendations. Why do you think I should do it? Okay. And off they go.
And many will come out, even if it's taken detours, and
be happy. Be happy with that.
Content with their experience.
But there are lots in between. And I think it's the in-between women that we're looking at because they're the ones who will go to me for a second baby. Oh, I didn't even realise that I could say no to that. Or I didn't realise that there were alternatives to that. No one told me that I could have an option. Those are the women that come out and sometimes feel a bit ripped off. They're like, oh, I did the hospital birth class that they told me to do and I read some books, but no one told me I could say yes or no to these things. Or, when this was told to me and I did try and say no, there was so much pressure that I ended up just giving in anyway. And now I'm a bit cross with myself that I did that. So those are the women that we find are often then unhappy.
Right.
And then the women on the opposite end of the spectrum that know what they want and are really empowered, they don't care if they hurt your feelings. Good. They are like, this is what I want. This is what I don't want. If you're unhappy with that, that's your problem. They're not often coming out feeling unhappy either because they've put their foot down and they feel okay with that. It's the women in the middle who are often feeling like they didn't know what was available or that there were choices or that they could say no. Those are the women that are often left going, hang on a minute, there's a bit missing. I've missed a trick here somewhere. Yeah.
So that shift for you on your journey through your midwifery career from working in the hospital as a team leader, experiencing potentially burnout, not being able to support the woman or give the care potentially that you came into this work wanting to give, that shift into private practice, what was that like for you?
Look, I think for me it's been different for most midwives, and I think that's just because of who I am. I'm often the sort that once I've decided on something, I dive into it, and I often do it at really random, I think for my journey, I was on leave. At the time, there was a lot happening in my personal life. My husband and I had just separated, so I'd literally taken leave from the hospital to figure out how I was going to care for my children and figure out a divorce. So I was in this liminal space. And while I was in that space, I was thinking about, what do I want this to look like when I go back? So I started looking into endorsement, which had always been my plan, which is part of private practice, but I wasn't actually going to use it for that at the time. I was just going to have it as like an extra tick on my resume, and you get paid more from the hospital if you've got it kind of thing.
Okay.
So I was going down that rabbit hole. And then while I had this time off and I had space, I just started to feel my nervous system I don't know. I was realizing, I was like, wow, I've actually been really heightened for a really long time.
Yeah.
So I felt that settling. And even though I was in the midst of all this personal stress, I did feel my nervous system settling, and I was feeling into the work and what the work would look like. But then I also started going, I guess, down a bit of a rabbit hole around private practice, home birth. I linked in with some home birth midwives just to talk, what do you do? How does it work? How does it work with your children? What do you love? What don't you love? And then I same with the documentary that I watched that made me just go, this is what I'm doing.
Is that the birth
time?
Yeah.
No, the documentary that I watched before I became a midwife. Suddenly just made me go, this is what I'm doing. I chatted to some midwives. I reached out to some people in the community. And then at about 11 o'clock at night, I made a business name and an Instagram, and I was doing it. So I was like, I was on leave. I think I had about 3 months leave from the hospital. I can't quite remember. It was something like that. And my plan, my soft plan, had been to go back to the hospital and maybe take 1 or 2 private clients a month and just kind of slowly move in this direction. That's what I'd been thinking for years. And I was like, I'll get there one day when the kids are bigger. But then when I had this time of leave and I was sort of diving into it more and getting excited and being like, wow, I was seeing the differences in the women, like when I was going along with some private midwives to, sit in with their clients, and I'd be like, okay, this woman, she's had a very similar birth to the women that I've worked with in hospital. She's not smarter or richer or has better education. Like, why is this woman so much happier than this woman? Like, what is going on here? And sort of feeling into that and hearing the stories from the midwives and hearing what they loved about their role and what the differences they saw with women. That's what sparked it. And then I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do that. So I literally put, I guess, my Instagram up. I started a bit of a business like, here I'm moving into private practice. I talked to midwives, and funnily enough, I spoke to a lot of doulas and photographers and like birth workers in that sort of space too, and said, what are women looking for? What do they want? What are they not loving? And I basically just made my business that. I'm like, what do they want? What are they not getting? And like I said, I started an Instagram. I put a post on the Gold Coast home birth community, and within a couple of months I was booked out for the rest of the year, and I never went back.
Yeah, because
and it was really as simple as that.
Yeah, because we do have such a lack. We don't have enough private midwives. Why do you think that is?
Not enough private midwives?
Yes.
I would say, it's very difficult to do. And by that I mean there's a lot of hoops to jump through. There's a lot of fluffing around. I myself, I have had many small children. Working in the hospital system, I actually really liked the fact that I had my roster and I knew exactly what my shifts were, and I had that in a month in advance, and I could plan my life, and I'm getting paid, and, my super's taken care of. Like, all of that is actually really attractive.
Yes.
It's part of it I probably miss the most, is that I know exactly what my shifts are going to look like, and I know what I'm getting paid and my super's getting done and all of that. But what makes it tricky, I think, is not necessarily just the continuity. It's the fact that I think they often feel like they're going to be alone. Like, what will that look like? I don't feel like I'm confident enough to do that. But I think also the culture in hospital, like, I've been a hospital midwife. I've heard the way that private midwives are spoken about. I've heard the way that they are sometimes questioned or made fun of or run into the ground when those other colleagues don't actually know how we work. And then hearing that and thinking, why would you want to go and be that person when you're hearing what that sounds like and hearing that they're going, the thoughts around what that looks like, and hearing other midwives sort of go, oh, what is she doing? What's that going on there? Or hearing how they're reported all the time. Like, why would you want to sign up for that?
Yeah.
So I can see why it makes it tricky for people to step into. But really, it's not that bad in terms of it sounds hard. But once you're in it and you're doing it, it's a small part of what we do. And it's no different to being in the hospital and worrying about, what if I make a mistake with a medication? What if I accidentally don't do the obs on time and something happens for that woman? Like, it's exactly the same. You're just in a different environment. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So for the listeners who aren't familiar with private midwifery, because culturally we only really have a projection of hospital-based birth, and when women go to a GP, they don't ask them if they want a private midwife. They say, do you have private health insurance? Here are obstetricians.
Yeah.
And they go, well, if you don't have private health, well, then here's a referral to the public system. So for those who aren't familiar with private midwifery, can you please explain what that actually looks like?
Yeah. So private midwifery is essentially a woman having her own midwife that she has chosen, not one that's just been assigned to her, that she can then have all of her antenatal care with. For the midwives that do birth care, she can then have birth with that woman if she wants. And then she can have all her postnatal follow-up with that midwife. So some midwives don't do birth care, and that's fine. The women do all their antenatal care with that midwife. They pop off to hospital to have their baby. They send her a text and say, hey, Shari, I had my baby yesterday. And then they go home the next day and she'll come and visit her at home. So it's exactly the same in terms of whether they have birth follow-up or not. So for the women who are wanting birth support, midwives can support them in hospital to be an extra support person, an advocate for them in that space, more support for their partner, those sorts of things. And then for some midwives who work like I do that have home birth as an option, women can choose to birth at home. So I think it's important for women to know that if you do have a private midwife, just where we live, it's not Australia-wide, but just where we live here on the Gold Coast, especially Gold Coast and Tweed, if your private midwife is going to support you in hospital, we do not have visiting rights to those hospitals. It's not something that's available to us. So when we come to the hospital as your midwife, we're not actually allowed to care for you. So we are not doing the blood pressures. We're not doing vaginal exams. We're not entering notes in the computer or talking to the doctors or doing all of that. When we step into that space, we are, I guess, a medical support person. So we can help you determine, is that CTG okay? They're recommending this. What are your thoughts around that? Here's some questions you can ask to get some more information. They've recommended that you have a forceps birth. These are some questions you can ask around that. Is that suitable for you? These are some things that are suitable for you, or would you potentially prefer to discuss in having a cesarean instead? So maybe a little bit more of that type of support than a doula can offer. But in that space, we are just more working like a doula. So we're doing more of the hands-on emotional support, physical support, the things that I know as a hospital midwife I haven't had time for. I can't always help a woman by massaging her back for hours on end because her husband's tired and fallen asleep, because I've got obs to do and the computer to fill in and the team leader to update, and I've got to go and have my tea break and I've got to cover someone else's tea break. So when we're in that space, we're much more able to be hands-on than often the hospital midwives are, because they've got so many other competing priorities. The reason that I guess is beneficial is we know from the research that a known midwife for women reduces the chance of pretty much every risk factor you can think of. Reduces PPH, reduces preterm birth, reduces cesarean, reduces episiotomy, it reduces induction. And it also improves women's outcomes for themselves, both physically and mentally, and for their baby, improves outcomes for breastfeeding in babies. There's just so many benefits to midwifery continuity of care. And that's where a private midwife, I feel, is leaps and bounds above the other models of care. And that is just because you know your clients so well and they know me. So when they ring me and they ask me a question, I already know what we've talked about. We talked about it last week. Same as if she's accepted or declined something, I know the reasoning behind that. If she has declined something, I understand why. I'm not going to ask her 30 times why. Why can you explain your reasoning? Can we go over that again? The only time I'm going to bring it up again is if something has changed and we need to revisit that conversation. It's not, whereas in, I suppose, a hospital space, you're meeting a different clinician every time. They're needing to give you the risks and benefits. They're wanting to hear your reasons for declining. And you have that conversation 15 times over the course of your pregnancy, because every clinician is obligated to have that conversation with you to tick the box. Whereas I've had those conversations over weeks and weeks and weeks with my clients.
And you get to know them personally that
absolutely
their personality, what they're like. And if you see something shift in them,
absolutely,
even in the birth, and you potentially know that was a fear that came up in a conversation, and you notice even just a shift in what they're saying, and it's for you to be able to pick that up, and even
it
just
makes all the difference
when you're sitting back and watching and observing, which
that's most of what our work is.
I like to kind of say to some of my clients, it's like you want to pay your midwife to do nothing in the birth.
That's the best outcome.
It's the same with obstetricians. So it's like you want to pay them to do nothing.
Absolutely.
Literally just
the best births I've been at, the woman's birthing on the pool, on the floor, wherever she happens to be. I'm sitting maybe close by. I'm drinking a cup of tea. I'm telling her she's doing an amazing job.
Yeah.
Her partner is her number one support person. They don't need me.
Yeah, that's what I did with my midwife. I was
that's right. I'm there as their hype girl. I'm their wing woman. If she looks around looking worried and she sees me smiling, she's like, great, we're good here.
Yeah.
But what they're paying for is on the rare instances that they need some help, that I'm there to do that.
Exactly.
But most of the time, we are doing just that. We're just sitting with them, no different to their sister or their best friend or their mum, reminding them that they are doing it, they can do it. The moments that they're saying that they're losing confidence in themselves, we're reminding them how strong they are and the things that they've worked through. When their partner needs a break, we're like, great, you've been awake a while, go have a sleep. I can sit with her and he can go, okay, I don't feel like I'm abandoning her with someone that she's never met before.
Yeah.
She'll be right for an hour or two. And he feels comfortable to step out, make a sandwich, go for a wee, call his mum, have a sleep. And we can be there to support her without him thinking like, oh, who are these people? I can't leave her with these people.
Because you build a relationship with the family.
The family.
It's
we get to know everything. We know
just the woman.
Sometimes it feels almost like it's a counselling session. We're talking about relationship stuff. We're talking about intimacy. We're talking about toddler behaviours. We're talking about how to integrate the dog with the new baby. I know where the tea is. I'm going to get up and make myself a cup of tea. We get to know them so well. So that by the time they're birthing, I don't need to ask them, are you okay with X, Y, Z? I already know the answer. I don't need to ask what time the dog needs to be fed. I can see it's dinner time. I'm going to feed the dog and put it out because he's busy doing things with her. So that's the benefit, is we know them so well.
Love that. So you've actually attended one of my courses. I invited you to come and sit. Well, you asked as well. And I would love to, from your perspective as a midwife, what was your experience, or what's your view on childbirth education and hypnobirthing?
Yeah. So firstly, from a view of childbirth education and hypnobirthing, I'd say to women, you can't do enough. And second of all, the hospital course is not enough. And then I would say from my own perspective as a woman, I know the course that I did as a woman, as a childbearing woman, and I thought that was okay. But when I look back, what I realise, it was actually priming me. I don't want to use the word groom, but
seeding
for what hospital intervention looks like. There was no discussion around pertinent questions. There was no discussion around having robust conversations. There was no real discussion around what's normal. It was kind of like, this is the process of labour and these are what forceps look like in case they come out on the day so you're not scared. That was pretty much the base of it. And at the time I was like, oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
But now having worked with women in this space and being the midwife on the receiving end of women coming in, so the women that have done great courses and the women maybe who've only done the hospital course, right? The differences I see is night and day. So firstly, I see that the women themselves are so much more aware of their options. So they're asking really great questions like, okay, so is that something that you're just recommending today or is that something overall? I see that they are asking just in general about, okay, well, if I accept this, then what? Often I find that can be a part of that's missing in the hospital conversation is we talk about the intervention, but we might not talk about what the follow-up may look like if you accept it or don't accept it. So I find that women are asking more of those type of questions. I also see that partners are so much more engaged in the space in terms of they themselves are asking more questions. They are standing up and advocating much more confidently. They're more hands-on in the birth space. Like I know I found as a midwife, even I saw that with my own kid's dad in the birthing space, it's very much they kind of step back like, oh, okay, well, you and the midwife kind of do your thing and I'll stand over to one side and hold your hand because I don't know where else to go and what else to do. And like they are often asking, oh, can I go to the toilet? Can I stand here? Can I hold her hand? Whereas the partners that have done these courses, they're stepping in. They're like, I'm getting in the shower with her. I'm getting in and shutting the door. Like I'm moving in, and they kind of push in and great because the second most important person in the room is him.
Yeah.
You know, so it's so good to see them step into themselves and, you know, in all other aspects of their lives, partners have no problem standing up and advocating for their women. Yeah. You know, if something was happening in the street, he'd be like, we're not doing that here, and he would step in.
Well, that's that masculine like energy of protection and holding and yeah.
Yeah. Whereas in the birth space, I would routinely see them step back. And they're not, you could see they're uncomfortable, but they're not speaking up.
Well, a lot of the time, like, and I've actually had clients who've said, you know, they've gone to an appointment and the caregiver has just spoken to the woman. That's it. And they're just kind of sitting like
they're not involved as part of the conversation.
Because they don't know what to ask.
Yeah, and so it's really great to see the partners be in there and be doing the things hands-on. I've even seen midwives where the partners have been really hands-on and they're saying to him, oh, could you just step out? And he's like, nope.
No.
Good. You work around him, not the other way.
Yeah.
You know, so it's been really good to see that them going, no, I will not move out of the way here. Yeah. I'm in this space.
This is my
I'm doing what she needs. This is my baby. If you want to work around us, please do that. But I'm not moving away from her to allow you to do something. And I think that's really amazing to see them stepping up into their confidence. So as you said, I had so many clients of mine that had just done your course, just, you know, either through my recommendation or they'd done it before they'd even met me. So through the time together, they're talking about your course and I'm like, wow, that sounds really great. But then I started thinking, well, I want to know more about what you're teaching so that when women are talking to me about what you're teaching, I can, I guess, integrate that and go, oh, yeah, and what about this and what did you learn from that? And also, you know, have you practiced X, Y, Z that you've sort of been taught? So I came along to sit in, and what I really loved, because obviously you have a big cross-section of women. You have home birth clients, you have clients that are maybe planning a cesarean, you have clients with private obstetrician, public health, GP shared care, the whole shebang. So what I loved is that the course really focuses on normal, natural, physiological birth, but then it talks about deviations. It talks about if potentially, as we know, there's a difference between a variation and a complication of care. So what's the difference between, well, this is a variation as opposed to actually this is a medical problem that you probably need support for. Talking about how to ask really good questions, because I think one thing I myself even learned from a podcast of yours is if you don't ask the right questions, you're not going to get good answers. So often women get the answers to the questions they asked and clinicians will be like, well, I answered her questions. Yeah, but you didn't tell her what she wants to know. And that's not the same thing because she didn't quite know what to ask to get that information. So women learning about how to ask really robust questions and also that process that we as midwives talk about. Well, okay, if not this, then that. Or if I accept A, is there a knock-on from A? Is there suddenly going to be a B, C, D? And I did find that as a midwife. Women would often accept an epidural and then suddenly be like, oh, I didn't know that meant that I couldn't walk around or that I couldn't have a water birth or I'd need a catheter.
And
I'd be like,
I'd have to birth on my back.
I'm like, how did no one, like I've come in, I've taken over, she's got an epidural, great, I'm going to take over this bit. And suddenly we're talking about how she's like, oh, I didn't realize that meant I couldn't get in the water. And now to you and I, that might seem really obvious, but that woman's like, oh, no one talked about that with me or no one discussed I'm now going to need a catheter and that feels really invasive and I wish I'd known that before because I would have maybe thought about this a bit differently. So thinking about, well, if I accept this intervention, what is the knock-on? What is the knock-on for my baby? Like often we don't talk about what happens for babies. If you accept this intervention or don't, what will then happen for your baby? Because often there's a policy around, well, if this has happened in labour or birth, the baby requires this thing. So sometimes that's not talked about. So it's really great to see women coming into it and going, okay, I've got the knowledge about the most common interventions
yeah.
and the common pathways, and I can now have some robust questions, and then they can focus on the integrative work, the stuff that's between them and their partner. I guess that's the emotional and spiritual work, the connective exercises, and that's what I feel like often's lacking in birth education. Because we talk a lot about the process of birth and how the baby's actually physically going to exit your body and what your partner can do and making sure that you're eating enough and drinking enough. But what about that connection between the two of them and the physical, you know, the rebozo work and the positional things? Because then in that moment when she's teary and overwhelmed, she's like, I don't know what to do. And he can say to her, how about you try the shower?
Yeah.
How about we do some deep breaths together? How about I just give you a bit of a massage? And she's like, oh, yeah, that sounds great. Because in that moment, her brain's not thinking about those things. She needs her support person to step in and go, I can do this thing for you. Now, she might hate it, and that's fine. You know, the poor man, she's like,
I do warn the guys, I was like, don't be offended.
Don't be offended. If she's suddenly like, stop.
And what she may not like at one point in an hour, she could love.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So not being offended by her suddenly being like, stop that immediately. You know, and then other times she's like, yeah, keep doing that. And he's like, I've been doing it for 2 hours and my arms are breaking off. It's like, that's okay. We can step in and we can relieve you and someone else can do it. But it's making sure that they know that they aren't just a bystander.
No.
They have a really active role, and it's a really beautiful role.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think was really great in the journey to birth is seeing that happen, because as you would know teaching it, oftentimes people don't want to ask questions. They don't want to look a bit funny. What if someone thinks that's a weird question? But all it takes is one partner to start asking questions, and then they're all asking questions. And then it's a really beautiful, big, open dialogue.
It is.
And then often my clients, the women, maybe the partners are at work, are saying, oh, you know, I was really shocked that he asked this question and then someone else asked a question and it was a question he had and then we talked about it the whole way home. Yeah. Whereas he might not have been comfortable to open up and say, well, what if this happens? Or what am I supposed to do? But when someone else leads that, then suddenly he can jump in and then they have a really big, beautiful discourse about it. You know, so that's been really lovely.
No, I love that. I so appreciate you sharing that, because for me, this is actually why I had to create my own program, because I've been doing this for 14 years. I've been trained in many programs, but I just there was nothing.
This gap.
There was nothing really about cesarean birth, very minimal about induction of labour and the energetics of the connection. And I think, and this is a generalisation, from what I've observed and seen, is that many women these days are so much in the masculine energy. They have businesses, they're they want to be planners, they want the list, they're up in their head, they want all the information, and though if they don't embody it and drop into it, it's useless. And so I really intentionally, when I was creating the program, was really okay, I want to give them the knowledge, and I don't want them to be too AD about it, audio, digital, or the data. It's okay, now I then want them to soften into it. And that's probably some of the best feedback that I get is, but also seeing the birth partners, whether or not, even I've had women bring their mothers, I've had same-sex couples, the dads in there. The way that then I see the connection of their oh my gosh, I actually seeing them wrapping their arms around, doing the soft touch, and the woman just literally softening and melting into them to the point where then all the hormones come in and they're all in tears. There's one experience that I'm not sure if you remember, I take them through, and everyone's just in
they're
tears.
realizing the connection and how big it's really big.
Yeah, I actually had her daddy dropped back a TENS machine this week, and he was very honest in his message. He's like, I've got the TENS machine, I'll bring it back. He goes, I just want to say that I'm a trained nurse in Canada, and when my partner suggested we do this, he goes, I was very what? I don't need this. And he was like, I was absolutely blown away and had no idea of how beautiful, what the role I could play was, how to navigate. And they did have some detours and they did have to navigate. And though their story was so beautiful, even though it did end up on a detour of cesarean birth, he's like, the way that she's reflecting on it, she's so proud of herself. She's so, and he goes, you've proven me wrong, Shari. And I cannot recommend this course more. So that's also why I wanted to invite you in too, because I think the more we can support each other, the more we support the women. It is a community.
Absolutely it is. The whole the birth community on the coast is amazing.
It is.
There are so many amazing practitioners doing amazing, amazing things. And there's so much out there available to women. It's just, as you said, for women being able to find it. And once they've found it, then they're telling everyone because they're like, oh, I found this amazing course or this amazing nutrition information or this amazing, chiropractor. Like there's so many amazing, like, holistic.
It all just works together.
Yeah, there are ways that women can work through pregnancy and birth. And you're right, I find it's often the dads that often have the most glowing reviews because women are like, well, I knew what I was going there for and I got what I went for. Like I learned what I needed to learn. I felt that was great. It was lovely. And the men are the ones who are crowing about it because they're like, they're like, oh, wow, the birth and seeing this and seeing my partner like that. And it's really amazing. And the one thing that you mentioned that stuck with me then was the masculine energy. And I agree with that because women, even in their labour, having to tell women and work with women to sort of get out of their head and let their body do what it's trying to do.
Soften back into the
and
feminine.
there's a lot of work that we can do around that in pregnancy. And I find the women that have done that in pregnancy, it's easier. When you're trying to midwife a woman through that in labour, it's more difficult because she is so used to being able to control the outcome. She's meeting KPIs. She's got a team of people she's working with. She's so good at that, but she's not good at allowing things to flow and not good at softening and not good at allowing other people around her to hold her and support her because she's the one doing the holding and supporting usually. So a lot of that work in pregnancy, that's something I'm pushing for women as well. It's like it's not just the physiology and the physical stuff and the learning. It's how are you softening into this process? How are you allowing your body to do what it needs to do? How are you being okay? Yeah, being okay with not knowing everything.
Yeah, surrendering.
Being comfortable in the uncomfortable parts.
Yeah.
Being comfortable with not knowing. And I had a beautiful client who they have their own business and one of their mantras for their business that she told me and I've stolen is uncertainty does not equal danger.
No.
And I was like, I love that because they're using it for their own business when what are the contracts looking like? When are we getting paid next? What if this doesn't work out? Uncertainty does not equal danger. And I was like, that is perfect for pregnancy because there is so much uncertainty.
Yes.
And we have to sit in the trust that our bodies know, our babies know, and that can be tricky, Yeah.
So I'm going to fire off a few fun questions just so we can really get to know you as we wrap up this episode. So these are just a few lighthearted questions so that my audience gets to know you personally. Tea or coffee?
Tea, every time. I can't drink coffee. It makes me too jittery. No, just regular old black tea. I'm very boring. Black tea, 1 sugar. I can drink that until I'm dead.
Okay, this is home birth or hospital birth?
Look, I'm a bit biased, so I would say home birth every time. However, there are times where I really feel like hospital is needed.
Yeah.
And when it's needed, they're really, really good at what they do. Like they're the team that I want.
Yes.
Yeah.
One book every pregnant woman should read.
Oh, that's a tricky one. I actually feel like it's not a book related to pregnancy at all.
Oh, okay.
My go-to would actually be Postpartum Depletion by Oscar Saralak because I feel like there is so much education around birth. You can read birth books till you're blue in the face, but it is one day of your life, maybe two, maybe 2 days of your life. But post-birth is where women often, the support falls down and they might be really great with the meals for 6 weeks where they've got great support, but suddenly they're 6 months down the line, a year down the line, or they're pregnant again and they're really, really depleted, or they're coming to me for a second and third baby and we're trying to, I guess, work on the depletion over the last couple of years. So, plan your postpartum team. That's
absolutely. And I'm working with a client right now. She's in my 6-month coaching program and preparing her for pregnancy, really conscious conception. And I sent her to Oscar and she's had a consultation with him. Like, he's absolutely amazing.
Yep. So definitely postpartum preparation. Read the books on postpartum preparation, nourishment.
As much as birth, one myth about birth you'd love to bust forever.
One myth. There's probably a few. I think one of them, the main one that I probably see in practice the most is that birth works well 99% of the time. Heck, even 95% of the time.
Yeah.
But I guess the way we see it is that you're really lucky if birth goes well for you. Like you're in the minority, like, oh, wow, you just got lucky. No. Actually, if you leave birth alone, 99% of women, you could pick them up and drop them in a forest and come back in 9 months and the baby would be born and all would be well.
Within 10 moons.
Right?
Yeah.
But by and large, birth works well 95% of the time. You just need to know what you're looking at and you need to leave it alone.
Yeah. Hands off.
Yeah.
3 words that describe birth.
Powerful. Amazing. And I would say it's probably not one word, but capacity expanding.
Yeah, expansion. Yeah, I love that. And finish this sentence. Birth is?
Amazing. Like it just.
Amen.
Yeah, I can't describe it, and it just. Oh, it probably makes me teary. It's just so beautiful.
Yeah, it is.
It's just beautiful being in that role for women. Like.
Yeah. And we're so lucky to have you to support women in this space.
Yeah, it's one of those things that you can't describe and the women that experience it, they can't describe it. It's funny because I had this conversation with a client the other day. How do we describe birth? I said, how do we as women, I've had babies, you've had babies, we've been having babies for thousands of years, our grandmas have had babies. How is it that we still cannot describe what birth is? None of us can really. We can tell you what it was like for me.
Yeah.
I can tell you what it might have been like for you when I've watched you birth, but I can't describe to another woman what birth is like. And that is because it is so transformative. Everything you've ever done will be measured by this benchmark for a long time.
It changed my
oldest
life.
child is 21 this year, and there are times when I'm doing hard things and I'm still like, was it that hard as that? No, I'm fine here. Because birth is hard, but it is also so beautiful. It'll be the hardest thing you've ever done, but it'll be the most beautiful, transformative, amazing thing you've ever done.
Yeah.
And we should treat it with that respect.
We should.
It's not just a day in your life and, oh, well, if it goes well, lucky you. Like, we prepare for so much in our lives.
I know, right?
And it's really something that women deserve to have good births. Yeah. And they can have good births. And a good birth doesn't mean that you've birthed, I don't know, out in the forest in a stream. A good birth can be a beautiful planned cesarean. A good birth can be a lovely induction with your whole family there. Yeah. But women deserve good births. And the current standard is the bare minimum women should be receiving. And that makes me sad.
I love that. So how can everyone find you, Nicole?
So I am on Instagram as Blooming Midwifery GC. I do have a website, but at the moment I'm having technical issues, but it will be back up soon. I'm not a technical girlie. That is not my sphere of genius. Right so bloomingmidwifery.com.au and Blooming Midwifery GC. Yeah. Most of my clients seem to come to me through Instagram. Yeah. I really only made a website because it seemed like the professional thing to do. Yeah.
Well, thank you for everything you do.
Yeah, thank you. It was lovely to chat.
I'm so grateful.
And I'm so excited to see where this goes because obviously I've been following your previous incantation of the podcast and there's so much available to women, so much amazing information, just getting it out there.
Yeah. Thank you. I will put all of Nicole's – I know there's been a fly in here.
I know.
I'll put all of Nicole's details in the show notes and please remember to share this podcast. I'll get this fly away from me. Please remember to share the podcast and remember, go and check out my freebies on my website. I will put the link to those below because I would love to support you more on your journey to birth.